So hey everyone, I'm really excited to be here today and moderate a chat on building and scaling the leading online marketplace for boat rentals, where I'll be joined by Jackie Baumgarten, who's the CEO of Boatsetter. So for those that don't know me, I'm Mike Williams. I'm the founder of Everything Marketplaces, which is a community for marketplace founders, teams, and leaders. So before that, I was a marketplace founder myself and started a few different marketplaces like Studio Time, which you can think of as like the Airbnb for music studios. So that is a peer-to-peer marketplace that I ran for 6 years before it was acquired in 2021. So for our chat today is going to be on the topic of peer-to-peer marketplaces. And I thought, there's no better person to have join me than Jackie Baumgarten, who, as I mentioned, is the CEO of Boatsetter. So Boatsetter is a leading online marketplace for boat rentals that operates in over 600 markets. It's also mentioned on Andreessen Horowitz top marketplace 100. And I've known Jackie for some time now, so I'm really excited to chat with her today. And we're going to be learning more about her journey from first starting Boatsetter to scaling it to where it's at today, which is a leading online marketplace for boat rentals. So Jackie, before we really jump into things, I think it might be great if you can just start off by giving us a little brief, background for yourself.
So I'm originally from Southern California. I am the third of 4 kids and the only girl. So I grew up very much a tomboy and decided to head out to the East Coast for college. I went to Wellesley, which is a super competitive all-women's college, and then had enough of the cold, went back to California for my MBA, where I went to Stanford. And after getting my MBA, I knew down the road I wanted to do something entrepreneurial, but it was really important to me to get foundational training before going out and starting something on my own. So I actually spent a fair amount of time in large corporations, which I think was a core element to learning about processes, leading teams, budgeting, and being able to do that within the structure of a larger entity and giving me the foundation that I needed, that I think many founders or entrepreneurs don't pursue before jumping into their own idea. So getting that corporate experience and doing intrapreneurial ventures within large companies was really a core part of my foundation before jumping off and starting Boatsetter. And after working in corporate America it was about 33, when I had decided I had now launched 2 subsidiaries for a large company and realized I knew how to write a business plan, how to lead teams. And, in my second venture by year 2, it was generating about 60 million in incremental revenue for the company. But here I was, mid-management, not making that much money, wanting to do something on my own. I decided it's now time. And the truth of the matter was I didn't quite know that I wanted to build Boatsetter just yet. So I quit and I gave myself the most valuable gift, which was the gift of time to figure out what I wanted to do next. And it was during that time that I formed the idea of what is now Boatsetter.
Yeah, so that's some really great, background and experience, building up to Boatsetter. So what was the actual founding story for Boatsetter then?
You've got it. So during that time, during those 6 months, I went through a very deliberate exercise of saying, okay, if I'm going to dedicate the next 20 years of my life or whatever it may be to something, I sure as heck better be passionate about it. So I started to log throughout my childhood, through my teens, my adult years, like what were the happiest memories that kept surfacing when I thought about what really makes me happy. And I kept coming back to memories being out on the water every summer with my family and my friends. And I knew I had to do something and focus around boating. I also, as a woman back in 2012, was very much an outsider to the industry. I didn't own a boat. I couldn't afford a boat. I didn't feel comfortable getting behind the helm of a boat. So those were barriers that existed naturally for me as a consumer. And there clearly weren't many women in leadership roles in the marine industry. So it was a little bit daunting. And I basically dug in to figure out how I could solve the problems from the consumer side of getting people access to this amazing experience that I knew boating could be. But on the flip side, in the US, private boat owners couldn't rent out their boats. And the reason for this was you have a recreational insurance policy, just like you would on your car. And that policy excludes or voids coverage the minute that you collect $1 in exchange for that vessel. And so my 2 older brothers who did own boats were complaining right and left that they couldn't continue to afford the boat, that they hadn't used it once in a year. And, I share their story because it's very much more common than you would think. So in the US, there are 15.6 million registered recreational boats. It's huge. And the part that just astonishes me is how underutilized those assets are. They get used an average of 12 to 14 days a year. So you really don't have an asset that's more expensive and less utilized. And I thought, if I could solve that underlying problem for owners and find a way so they could legally and insured rent out their boats, then there was a real opportunity. So that's how things began. I set out to become an expert in the marine recreational insurance industry. And I learned everything there was to learn about claims reasons. And I started to pitch insurance underwriters as opposed to investors on buying into the vision that we had. And it took about a year getting through retail brokers, wholesale brokers, and finally found an underwriter who was familiar with large commercial fleet underwriting, who agreed to build and pioneer the very first peer-to-peer insurance policy with me. And that's how we began. Today, I'm very proud to share that we have expanded that, and we now have exclusivity to the only peer-to-peer insurance policy in the US with Geico and Boat US.
That's awesome, and thanks for sharing with us. It sounds like the insurance is a big kind of unlock for you as a marketplace.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So going back, to the early days, what were some of the initial kind of challenges? And I would say, like, as marketplaces, typically kind of building supplier demand, one side's typically a little bit harder. So how was that for you in a Boatsetter?
So as mentioned, the first critical hurdle was solving for the insurance. Then the next hurdle was proving that we could build out and maintain equilibrium between supply and demand. So for us, we had a lot to prove because we had to educate owners since this was a new activity. And so there's a lot of one-on-one education in exposing owners to the fact that they can now for the first time rent out their boats, and then educating them about how the insurance works. So first getting boats on, and then being able to make users aware that there is the possibility to be able to rent directly from an owner through a technology platform that makes it seamless. So building out the platform was the next challenge after securing the insurance. And I knew that I had to be able to prove not only to the insurance company and underwriters, but to my partners that we could do this. And I thought the best market to test this in, which is the most challenging market, would be Florida. You have diverse waterways, you have blue water, you have the intracoastal, you have an array of boat types from runabouts all the way to super mega yachts. And I thought, this is the perfect market for us to test this and prove out operationally that we can do this. So 2015 was really more of a trial period and really focusing on proving that we could manage supply and demand within the Florida market and be able to understand the dynamics and the economics of the business in a manner that I could prove that we had healthy unit economics, we had a healthy contribution margin, so that at that point, once we had optimized in South Florida, we were ready to then go out and seek fundraising so we could expand. And that was the next critical challenge, was finding capital to help scale. And I raised money from a variety of sources, from strategic partners. That was a critical element for us to prove out our model and gain credibility. And it helped us also in getting access to supply and demand in a non-dilutive way. Then transition to high net worths, seed investors, then shifted into venture capital, until most recently we've raised from growth and PE. The other side and challenge that we faced was really getting transparency and figuring out when it was time to make the investment into our data and analytics team. And that was a huge catalyst for us in really opening up our ability to scale and be able to fundraise in a more meaningful way. Because what it helped us realize is that every market is distinct. We had to stop thinking of ourselves as a global or national marketplace. And really what we are is a local we are more of a very local marketplace in hundreds of local markets. And that thinking and mindset shifted our go-to-market strategy and how we could utilize capital in the most cost-efficient way. So for example, the types of boats that you need in Florida and the price points that you need vary from what you need in the Chicago market. And having that information helped guide us in terms of what marketing channels, how to spend on SEM, what messaging to convey, what boats to showcase, how to inform owners on what price they should price their boat at to drive conversion. And on the flip side, we were able to then really hone in on liquidity metrics at a local market level and see when our conversion rate dropped because we had sufficient demand, but we needed more boats of a certain type and size in a market. We could use that data to then inform our supply team to go out and onboard just those specific boats through marina partnerships, through direct marketing, and that helped us grow in a super cost-effective way. So that was a key inflection point for us.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, and I'm sure about how different all the markets are, right? Like all the different nuances. So just for a little bit of context, how many markets do you operate in today?
So we are in over 700 markets, and we've had over 50,000 boats start listing on the platform.
So actually, I had one question for you, and that was, expanding beyond just boat rentals as far as like a category into maybe into experiences a little bit. Could you share a little bit more about that and kind of what that expansion process was like?
Absolutely. So our vision has always been to be the global destination for incredible experiences on the water for anyone, anywhere. So you'll note that I very deliberately didn't use the word boat rentals in that mission statement, but we've begun with boat rentals and we've begun shifting into experiences in terms of not only how we communicate and message to the activity that's available to our users, but also in terms of the search on the platform. We kicked off in early 2020 our first experiences with Boatsetter Lux and Boatsetter Fishing, but we plan to expand that to everything you can imagine, from sailing to sandbar hopping to bachelorette parties to water sport activities. And it will continue beyond just boats. We want to continue to build and add PWCs, so jet skis. And as you can imagine, as you start building a core of users from people who are on water active, enthusiasts, our owners, our captains and boat managers, that's a powerful ecosystem that we can start to in the future add additional revenue streams and verticals around. Whether we wanted to start playing with try a boat before you buy it and supporting the boat sales side of things, all of these are possibilities, all based on the core foundation of the data that we are collecting on all of our users. So moving into experiences is where we are shifting now, and there will be much more to come in the future.
Yeah, that sounds really cool and like a big step for you guys as far as experiences. So as far as when it comes to the specific use cases for that, like if I'm looking for to go on a say for instance maybe like a 3 to 5 day kind of excursion or whatnot, does that come with a captain, and is that like an option to have a captain or not? Or
I'm so glad you asked that. So one of the things that's really unique about Boatsetter, if we go back to our core objective of making boating accessible to anyone, well, I told you, I myself wasn't comfortable getting behind the helm. So as part of the foundation of what we built, we also have the largest database of U.S. Coast Guard licensed captains. And there are multiple captains assigned to any boat. So as a user, you can pick whether you want a captain, whether you don't. You can select your captain based on the experiences they provide, the ratings that they've had. And that has enabled us to offer our services to a much broader audience base, well beyond just your traditional boater or people who've experienced boating in the past. And that's really the beauty of what Boatsetter is trying to do, is open up the on-water experiences to anyone. And one of the things that I'm actually most proud of is if you look historically at the demographics of boat ownership. So 2-3 years ago, the average boat owner was a 58-year-old Caucasian male and aging. So the industry really was facing some bleak stats in terms of where they were going to get their next buyers from. And we have completely turned that on its head. Boatsetter is the gateway for the next generation of people who want to get out on boats and eventually buy boats. So let's see if I remember these stats correctly, I think it's over 75% of our renters are under the age of 43. Our fastest growing segment is Gen Z. And the stat that I am so proud of is that 46% of our users are women. So we're bringing people into the boating lifestyle that have never experienced it before. And we're going to continue to reach outside of the boating community to get people out on the water. And you got me going. One other thing we launched this year to really get more people exposed and break down the fear barrier, we launched the largest on-water training program with U.S. Coast Guard licensed captains, and it's free. So in key cities, you can sign up for free and go out for a couple of hours and learn the basics of how to dock a boat, how you should handle yourself on the waterways, and getting people exposed to boating.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So how did that come about?
Under the same mission of wanting to break down the barriers of getting out on the water. And it was born by our own employees and team members as an idea of how we can continue to expand and create new experiences. And it's been fantastic. It's a wonderful funnel in terms of building awareness and then getting people on the water and then more comfortable with becoming renters on the platform.
Awesome. So one thing I did want to talk about, is the past few years, kind of, during the pandemic. So, how has that kind of affected maybe your, the market, and are there any kind of specific challenges that you face as a marketplace?
Absolutely. I think just as anyone going into early 20 in March of 2020, when the market turned on its head and things were locked down, we weren't sure what the impact was going to be for Boatsetter. And we made a concerted decision to keep all of our team members. And, when other companies were laying off people, and we knew that this was actually an opportunity to invest and double down on our product, data, and tech. And we built out our data and analytics team. We built out our product team. And when things picked up, in the second half of 2020, it was the greatest investment we ever made. And what we found was people were not necessarily traveling internationally. So many of our out-of-market rentals shifted to in-market. And we saw a huge expansion across inland lakes. Something that you may not know is 94% of Americans live within a 20-minute drive to navigable waters. So we saw a huge surge in organic development in inland lake markets during COVID, because being out on a boat with friends and family was a safe way for people to be able to enjoy the outdoors while still social distancing with their bubble. And we saw a change as most recently as the market, the macroeconomic market has been challenged, increasing gas prices, increasing travel costs, inflation. Some of the changes we're seeing and we've reacted to is people are more price sensitive. So we actually invested and made changes into the product to allow for shorter durations of rentals to give people more cost-effective options. So 2-hour, 3-hour, 6-hour, and so on. And we saw a 50% increase in shorter duration rentals. And we added instant booking as a unique feature that we have. Because we have privately owned peer-to-peer boats, we have sole access as their primary calendaring system. And so they could sign up for instant book, which gives people more options with shorter planning period. So the booking window has also narrowed. That's something we've seen in the last few years. And the last and probably most critical and phenomenon that we've seen shift in the data and on the platform is owners are realizing that this isn't just a marketplace where they can offset the cost of ownership. This is a viable business opportunity. And a lot of our private owners have now made this a business and invested in their own commercial policy and even bought 2 or 3 boats or more in some cases. And last year, 70% of our revenue came from what we're calling Boatsetter operators, people who are now doing this almost professionally, but weren't doing this as a profession prior. So we're definitely seeing a growth in what we're calling entrepreneurs on the water. And that's something we're very excited about. And I think as the macroeconomic challenges continue, Boatsetter is going to be a wonderful alternative for people to be able to generate revenue in a more challenging market.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear, and it sounds like you definitely have some some major kind of tailwinds for you right now. And on that note, it's a perfect kind of segue into your recent funding round, which you announced. It's big congrats on that, by the way. So
Thank
could
you.
you maybe share a little bit more about that with us?
Absolutely. We announced in July our Series B, which was 38 million in primary, and then there were also some secondaries. So it was close to about 60 million in total. And I have to say, this experience was meaningfully different than earlier fundraising efforts. And I imagine that founders across the globe are experiencing similar challenges and shifts. And I think those who are in the process or need to fundraise really need to prepare themselves for a much higher level of scrutiny, given that what I'm seeing is that investors have a much lower risk appetite than they did in the past. And I think founders should prepare themselves for significantly more intensive and deeper due diligence from investors. In our case, there were actually third-party companies that were hired to, former CTOs to evaluate our tech, Deloitte to evaluate our financials, separate legal diligence. We had former McKinsey partner evaluate our go-to-market strategy. No expense was spared. And I think the duration of the due diligence was longer than what we've typically experienced. So I think prepare for that, be organized, and be thoughtful about how you approach your diligence, because there is no doubt that it is a distraction on the team from the core operating business. So if you can have one or two people, yourself as a founder or CEO, plus your either finance lead or one or two people who can pull the data and create a bubble to sort of protect the rest of the management team so the business continues, is really key. I think thinking and planning for that is critical. Also, it's sad to say, but the reality is, I think we have to be more realistic that valuations are not what they were years prior, and particularly for marketplaces, expect a lower multiple on revenue. Even if you're showing high growth rates, the market has just shifted. And the tenor that I hear from investors is a desire and a need to be able to see a path to profitability. You don't have to be profitable to raise, but you have to be able to show your unit economics and your contribution margin is healthy enough with a clear path to profitability. So, I guess my final words on that is, there's a ton of venture capital out there that still needs to be invested in the next few years. I think in the US, we're sitting on over 290 billion on the sidelines right now, and over 160 billion is earmarked for investment. But the scrutiny is going to stay high and valuations are going to be pushed down. And that's the reality of the market we're facing.
Yeah, certainly, and I appreciate sharing with us on that. So definitely something I wanted to talk about a little bit here with all the founders. So you have some pretty incredible experience, of course, building and scaling a Boatsetter to where it's at today. So kind of off that note, do you have any specific tips maybe for earlier stage kind of, I would say, peer-to-peer marketplace founders and teams that might be helpful?
Yeah, I think if I could turn back time and have changed anything, I would have made the investment into our data and analytics team and really building out and supporting our product team sooner. I think the tendency early on is to backfill a lot of functionality with human capital. There are other marketplaces where they have their website as a lead gen, but then they have a lot of salespeople to help close and drive the transaction. I think the sooner you make the investment thoughtfully into product, that enables scale in a meaningful way, and it's going to help support your valuation. When you go out to raise. So that I think was one of the biggest pivotal points for us, is giving us that transparency down to the local DMA level, so we could see what our LTV to CAC ratio was in a specific market and understand the return on investment for each marketing channel and be smart about how we shift and allocate, and at the same time, shifting the energy that our supply team is spending on the right boat for the right market. So data is key to helping drive scale and investment. That it's a big investment. You don't see the returns immediately, but it's worth having the discussions now with your board to make that investment.
Yeah, that's a really helpful tip for us here. So this is really fun to kind of go back and learn more about the early days of Boatsetter, and the kind of the journey to where you're at today. A huge congrats once again on the on all the great progress and the recent rounds. So before we kind of wrap things up here, what's exciting and ahead for Boatsetter?
Well, we just launched fishing as a new vertical. So those of you who love fishing, we have an amazing array and selection. We're going to continue to launch and release new experiences. We're continuing to improve the mobile app for owners, the mobile app for renters. We're going to continue to drive and create revenue streams for people who want to be entrepreneurs on the water. So if any of you out there are into Uber driving or buying homes, the return on asset purchase on a boat, from what we're seeing, far surpasses other assets. So jump on board and join us, and we're going to be evangelizing that message as well.
I love it. I love the jump on board. So awesome. Well, this is a really fun chat. So glad we got to chat today and learn a little bit more about Boatsetter as the as the largest online marketplace for boat rentals. So
well, thank you so much for the time. This was exciting.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This is great to chat and be here with you all.